Canada is a country that relies a fair amount on air transportation. Sure, sometimes you can take a train or a bus, but with a trip from Halifax to Windsor, Edmonton to Ottawa, or Vancouver to Winnipeg all taking several days, most people fly. Calgary, one of Canada's largest cities, features zero intercity rail service, so in that case the choice has basically been made for you. So then how are the airport rail options in Canada's business-friendly province? Let's take a look. This is RM Transit, a channel about trains and sometimes also airports, often bringing the two together. Now obviously Canada needs more and better intercity rail, including fast rail on the Quebec City-Windsor corridor, daily cross-country service from Toronto West and Montreal East, ideally with trains built this century, and ideally some form of passenger rail service between Edmonton, Calgary, and other prairie cities. But in the meantime, Canada has gradually been connecting its airports up with rail. First we got Vancouver, then we got Toronto, and Montreal and Ottawa both have their own airport rail connections under construction. In fact, Toronto is even edging towards a second air rail link with the Eglinton Crosstown West extension. Take that, Melbourne. Melbourne currently still doesn't have an airport train. I feel bad for making fun of Melbourne for this. Good job on the metro tunnel, Melbourne. Better luck next time with the airport link. Airport rail links can be really good projects. They often get dismissed as airport shuttles for the wealthy, but that seems like the projection of someone who's only ever experienced the Heathrow Express, which is an airport shuttle that doesn't go downtown for the wealthy. Of course, the real good airport rail links are projects like the RERB, or the Piccadilly line, or Vancouver's Canada line. These are all projects which provide really convenient links for people traveling from and to the airport with the city, but also for workers who work at the airport to get to their job. The reality is that airports are centralized suburban locations with tons of direct employment, which makes them natural places to serve with high-capacity rapid transit. That crucially gets cars off the road, but also really importantly helps bring down the carbon intensity of this very carbon-intensive industry. And of course, yes, these services can be great for business and tourism. And if your city is going to have tons of people visiting, why not get them on public transit as opposed to on the roads in a taxi or rental car? It's good for everyone. Now, it's fairly well known that Albertan cities have quite substantial and very well used light rail systems. Calgary's system, for example, more or less remains the most used such system on the continent. Even while LA, Denver, and Dallas all have bigger systems in bigger cities, Calgary still moves more people. These systems are a real Canadian success story that really makes me raise my eyebrows when people say, Alberta is just like Texas. And what's exciting is that both cities are doing big expansions. Okay, mostly just Edmonton, but both cities are doing some projects. So you'd assume there are comprehensive trains to planes plans. But there aren't airport trains in either of Alberta's big cities. And as it turns out, even while Montreal and Ottawa are building such services, neither of Alberta's big cities are. So what's going on today and what should they do? In Edmonton, there is a semi-decent excuse for the lack of an airport train, which is that the airport is just really far from the city center. Vancouver Airport is about 10 kilometers from the city center, Toronto Pearson is about 20, Montreal is 15, Ottawa is about 10, but Edmonton's airport is 25 kilometers south of the city center. Now, on one hand, I actually think it's kind of nice that at least one big Canadian city has an airport that's far from the city center, which is nice because it means that large parts of Edmonton don't have low-flying planes landing at the airport. But it also means that getting to the airport probably means getting in a car. There is an airport bus, and they even copied Montreal and called it the 747, but it runs once an hour for most of the day and only once every half hour during peak periods. That means that if you're unlucky, you might have enough time to drive downtown and back before the bus actually departs the airport. At the very least, Edmonton should have buses every 15 minutes to the airport to create an option that people actually want to take. Especially because with shoulder bus lanes on the highway, the buses should be able to fly along at rapid transit speeds. Maybe you could even do double-decker buses like Vancouver or Toronto do with some of their highway buses. Clearly at some point there needs to be a rail extension of Edmonton's capital light rail line down to the airport. In fact, it's already getting extended south from its current terminus at Century Park all the way down to Heritage Valley, which means the final leg down to the airport is just 12 kilometers, and it is in very easy environments near wide highways with lots of space to build, which should also make it very cheap. At the airport itself, there should be a big, comfortable Up Express in Toronto style station, with platform screen doors that keep passengers comfortable and warm while they're waiting for their train. And like the Bergen tram system that I covered in a recent video, the platform should be right in front of the airport terminal, so it's the most obvious option for someone landing in the city for the first time. Ah, there's a train, I'll take that. The situation in Calgary, much as with the light rail expansion in that city, is somehow worse. While Calgary does, yes, have 2 city bus routes to the airport which provide a half-decent service, including the iconic 300 Airport Express bus route, this is pretty bad when you realize that Calgary Airport is kind of going gangbusters. In 2023, Calgary Airport moved 18 million passengers, which is surprisingly close to the number of passengers moved by both Vancouver and by Montreal. The airport is doing really well. It opened its nice new international terminal in 2016, WestJet has its new 787s, which it's using to fly all kinds of interesting international routes. And to the detriment of Edmonton, it seems like a lot of that air traffic is being sent through Calgary before going everywhere else in the world. Calgary is also acting as a huge logistics hub, not only for Alberta, but also kind of for Metro Vancouver, since as Yute talked about in one of his previous videos, there is very scarce industrial land in the lower mainland. So Calgary is benefiting a lot from a lot of BC logistics being outsourced to Alberta. And so given all of this, and the fact that Calgary tends to be a bit of an overachiever, it's really surprising to me that there isn't even a clear plan for an airport rail link on the books. Now there have certainly been proposals, but they're just that, proposals. And at this point, by the time anything is actually built to Calgary International Airport, its passenger numbers per year are going to be in the mid 20 million range. And yet I see the city sort of heading towards a trap. There's been a lot of talk over the years about an airport people mover that would connect across from the Green Line to the airport and then to the Blue Line. But that's just not the best way of serving the airport. While automated people movers are common for connecting multiple terminals at huge airports like Frankfurt or Singapore, the best practice for air rail links is to bring the trains straight to the airport terminal, so you don't have to use some intermediate mode of transportation to get to the train station. Now, you might say, well, look at the US. There are tons of air train type systems, either at JFK or Oakland or Phoenix, where you get on an automated people mover and it takes you to a local train station to head into town. And of course that's true, but a large part of why these systems exist is that funds previously weren't allowed to extend transit directly to airports. So there had to be this intermediate mode that was actually allowed to be funded to connect airports to transit systems. But these rules have changed, and the best air rail links in the US are also just the ones that take the train straight to the terminal, like the Chicago L going to O'Hare or MARTA going to Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta. Internationally, the biggest and best airports from Dubai to Paris, Singapore to London, and Hong Kong to Sydney all have direct airport rail links that take the trains directly to the airport terminals. No people mover to some station on the outskirts of the airport lands. Calgary can and should plan for a similar setup, and I see there being a natural 3-phased approach which lets you do this. Phase 1 takes the Blue Line to the airport. It actually already ends quite close to the airport grounds at Saddletown, so with a 6-kilometer extension, including through a tunnel under the eastern runway that was intelligently already built when the road tunnel was built, you can connect the Blue Line up to the airport terminals themselves. This project should be under construction now, and this wouldn't preclude a further extension of the Blue Line north to Redstone since the connection could operate as a shuttle, but I would prefer it operate as a branch since you would be able to get a direct downtown to airport connection on the Blue Line every 15 minutes or so. This would provide a frequent and consistent service that provides a 1-seat ride to East, West, and downtown Calgary in just 40 minutes. And it would be a great option for tons of travelers as well. Of course, the trains wouldn't run at all hours, so the 300 bus should be brought back as an overnight service that connects airport workers who might be working very early or very late shifts, kind of helping to build Calgary into a big 24-hour hub airport that is always in action. Phase 2 of great transit to Calgary International Airport would be the Express Airport Banff train. I talked about this project in a previous video, but it's really awesome. Essentially, you'd utilize a short rail spur from the CP tracks running just west of the airport to run heavier trains like the Stadler Flirt, soon to be running in both Ottawa and Dallas on an express route every 15 minutes to downtown Calgary. This would be your more premium business and tourist traveler train, but it would also be the express to Banff option, with a few trains every day extending from downtown Calgary all the way to the lovely mountains. And this wouldn't just be the Tourism Express, it would also be the I don't want to spend an hour parking my car at Banff Express. And this project has been going on for a long time, so at this point I really would just like to see some movement. The final, third phase finishes the connections between Calgary Airport and the Calgary train system, with an extension of the Green Line to the airport. This project is probably at least 20 years away, since we haven't even started construction on the southern leg of the Green Line yet, but it's an important thing to plan for in the future. It would provide more service and capacity to the airport, as well as direct connections to North Central Calgary, the Entertainment District, and the new Flames Arena, as well as the Southeast, with the train every 15 minutes or so actually serving the airport, with the other trains on the Green Line continuing further north into the city. All of these transit connections would make Calgary International the best served by rail airport in Canada, with 12 different trains per hour fanning out across the city and providing a ton of direct links. That would be the type of rail service that this growing city could grow into. And best of all, these connections could all be built fairly inexpensively. No need to get on some people mover where you probably stand, it weaves around the airport lands, and then eventually you're dropped off at a suburban C-train station where you need to go down some escalators and wait for another train. The only other thing that I think is really important is the station design itself. Toronto made the mistake of putting its Up Express station in a convenient location, but one where adding additional rail connections is very difficult. And what that's going to mean is that probably in the long term, Toronto's airport is going to have a bunch of rail connections, but in different locations in the airport grounds. Now that's mostly fine for airport travelers, but it's really inconvenient for the many people who might want to take a trip that just passes through the airport. In Calgary, that might be someone traveling from Martindale, great name, to Highland Park via the airport, taking the Blue Line up to the airport and then the Green Line back down. Without a convenient connection at the airport, this trip isn't going to be viable and this person will probably drive, since the buses in Calgary are somehow worse than the light rail expansion plans. The airport rail station in Calgary should be master planned so that all of the 3 different rail connections can all terminate side by side, kind of like at a traditional European rail terminal, where people can walk out of the airport and choose their poison of 3 different rail routes to get them to downtown Calgary and the rest of the city. The platforms could be right smack in the middle of the airport U, with elevated walkways taking people to the terminals, and room to add more terminal space around in the future, since there would be loads of air rail capacity to handle ridership growth. So today, Alberta doesn't have airport rail of any kind, unless you count the Blatchford extension of the Edmonton light rail system. But its cities should have some of the best airport rail services in North America, since its cities already have some of the best light rail in North America. Oh, and if you want to know what I think about a future high-speed rail link between Calgary, Edmonton, and their airports, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for a future video. Thanks for watching.